There've been a number of attacks that have made the news recently, which have affected critical national infrastructure. The attacks on the Ukrainian distribution network, power distribution network, have become somewhat infamous in cybersecurity circles. Not least because they were so targeted and well executed as well. Somebody used some remote access onto the control systems to get onto that control system. They used it against its owners effectively, so they used the control system to open circuit breakers and put a large part of Ukraine into the dark. And the next thing they did was to basically destroy the control system so that it couldn't be used to rectify the problem. And while they were doing that, they actually mounted what's called a denial of service attack on the phone system as well, so it became very difficult for people to communicate with each other. The level of security on that system was very poor. The way the attacks were carried out could have been prevented quite easily, but the results were spectacular, and it's removed forever the sort of why would anyone do that kind of thing argument. Closer to home, pretty much everyone must have caught wind of the WannaCry attacks, which affected the NHS and dozens of other companies worldwide in many countries. This was very different from the attacks on the Ukrainian infrastructure in that it wasn't targeted in any particular way. In fact, the attackers had very little control over it. Once they released it, it's a bit like releasing a virus into the world. The NHS had problems because of some of the older technology that they have, so they had some XP systems, but also because they hadn't managed to patch some of their newer systems as well. So although it was spectacular, a lot of the effects could have been prevented with a good security strategy. Securing critical national infrastructure poses a number of problems. There's usually a lot of legacy technology. A lot of the power plants and waterworks and so on that we rely on have equipment in them that's in some cases decades old. So obviously this equipment was never designed, possibly not even with the internet in mind, but certainly not with security in mind. Lots of security technology is designed for new systems. For example, it's quite common for new products to not be supported any further back than, say, Windows 7. It's not practical to rip all these things out and replace them with new technology which is secure. It's not just the cost of replacing the technology, but the whole process of replacing these control systems is very involved. So that's not an option. So what can you do to secure these things? There's quite a lot you can do. First of all, there's no real reason why these things should be connected directly to the internet. Putting these systems behind firewalls, which is one of the main technologies that we use, is obviously a good idea. It protects them from network-based attacks. Making sure that people are very careful about what they do with removable media and other things is also important. So there's been a lot said about the role of people, staff in organisations in cybersecurity. The key thing in making people an asset rather than a weakness or a vulnerability is for them to understand what's required of them and crucially why. Have regulations, procedures and so on, make sure they're well publicised, but make sure that people understand what could happen to the business if these things are not followed. So one of the problems in cybersecurity is the shortage of skilled people. There are a number of ways when people can develop the skills. There are a lot of people who teach themselves and so on. There are university courses now, and at Atkins we've got a scheme internally to help people cross-train from other disciplines, but it's going to take a long time before there's enough people out there to do everything that needs to get done. Of how to address the risks is quite difficult. We prefer to go from a business risk point of view, because at the end of the day that's what matters to people. So risk tends to come in the flavours of lost revenue, damage to the environment, impact on people's health and well-being, the impact on reputation of an organisation. So what we like to do with organisations is go in and we will look at the technical risk, which does involve looking at the people and processes around the systems and around the security, as well as the sort of hard technology. And then going back and seeing what can happen to the systems. And that's the best way of looking at risks and deciding, where to spend your money, how to prioritise things. Because there aren't any quick fixes. For most organisations, it'll take years to get to a good level of security. So it really is important that the resources and effort are focused in the right place. There's two pieces of regulation which are going to come out in May of 2018. They're close to each other in the way that they are constructed and so on, but they have effects on different systems and different parts of people's lives. The better known one is GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, which is going to replace the existing Data Protection Act. So this is going to be all about making sure that people's data is stored correctly. Only data which needs to be stored is actually collected and stored, and so on. The Network and Information Systems Directive is sort of the same thing, but for control systems. So if breaches occur and there's either a loss of personal data under GDPR or an impact on the delivery of an essential service because of an issue with something that comes under the NIST directive, then organisations are going to be facing fines of up to 4% of global revenue. So we think that will have quite an impact in the boardroom. There is history of people trying to adopt these kinds of legislative approaches in the past. So in the US, the North American Electricity Reliability Corporation brought out a set of regulations which are probably over 10 years old now, which were designed to accomplish very similar things to the NIST directive, but in the North American power sector. And there were a lot of teething troubles and hurdles to overcome to get people to understand these regulations. They have had a significant effect on cybersecurity, but we'll see how we fare with GDPR and this directive in the coming years.